Cops wrongfully arrest a black woman until she calls her sister, the U.S. Attorney General. Lena DuBois never imagined she'd spend the night behind bars, especially not in the sleepy suburb of Millstone, just outside Atlanta, Georgia. She was on her way back from a day of volunteer work, humming her favorite tune as her car cruised down the highway. Then came the red and blue lights in the rearview mirror, a simple traffic stop that would soon spiral into a nightmare of brutality and injustice. She pleaded her case while officers sneered, hands tightening around her wrists, but they had no idea who her sister was or the monumental power she wielded. This is their story, and it changes everything. Lena DuBois was on her way home from a fulfilling but exhausting day of volunteer work at the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park in downtown Atlanta. She had spent the afternoon guiding children on tours, teaching them about civil rights history, and reminding them that every voice, especially those that come from marginalized communities, can help shape a brighter future. It was a role that fit her warm nature perfectly, and she loved seeing the spark in the young visitors' eyes as they learned about heroes of the past. The weather was typical for a late summer day in Georgia, hot, humid, with the evening sky painted in bands of pink and orange. Lena was weary from her day but carried a certain contentment in her heart, that deep satisfaction one gets from meaningful work. She left the park and navigated the downtown streets, eventually merging onto the interstate that would lead her to Millstone, a quiet suburb about 30 minutes outside the city. Millstone was the kind of place you'd pass through without realizing it, small enough to have only one movie theater and a handful of family-owned restaurants lining a single main street. It was known for its annual Harvest Festival, the robust high school football team, and a fiercely proud local population that sometimes regarded outsiders with suspicion. Lena had moved there after accepting a teaching position at a local community center. Though she felt some glimmers of tension in the air over race and politics, she believed wholeheartedly in bridging those gaps through education and empathy. As she drove, she hummed a soft tune. The radio turned low enough that it provided only background static. She was thinking about what she might cook for dinner, maybe a stir-fry, and whether she had enough fresh vegetables at home. Then, in the rearview mirror, she saw flashing red and blue lights. Her heart skipped a beat. It was never pleasant to be pulled over, even for a minor issue. With a calm breath, Lena checked her speedometer. She was going exactly the speed limit. She flipped her blinker on and gently pulled over to the shoulder. The cruiser behind her screeched to a halt, headlights illuminating the interior of her car. Her mind raced with possibilities. Did she have a broken taillight? Was her registration expired? She felt a tingle of apprehension as a black woman in a predominantly white suburb, but she brushed the anxiety aside. She had done nothing wrong, and she believed in the power of honesty and calmness. "Good evening, officer," she said as the man approached. His face remained shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. She rolled down her window and quickly located her driver's license and insurance. "Is there a problem?" The officer stared at her for a moment, then flicked on his flashlight, shining it directly into her eyes. Lena squinted but forced a polite smile. "License and registration," the officer barked, ignoring her greeting. His voice was clipped, devoid of warmth. Lena handed over the documents with steady hands. "Yes, sir. Here you go," she said, trying to maintain eye contact despite the glaring light. The nameplate on his uniform read Officer Barton, and his partner hovered a few steps behind. Officer Barton said nothing at first, flipping through her paperwork with excruciating slowness. His partner glanced into the back seat of Lena's sedan as if expecting to find contraband in plain sight. "Headlight is out," Barton finally announced, though Lena was certain both were functional when she last checked. "Also, your tail light is flickering. What's in the trunk?" "Nothing but some groceries and teaching materials," Lena replied politely, certain that her lights were in good shape, yet she wasn't going to argue. It was safer to stay calm. Barton's partner, a burly man with shaved hair and a narrow gaze, circled to the other side. "Step out of the car, ma'am," he commanded, voice cold as steel. Lena blinked, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady and respectful. "May I ask why?" Barton tightened his grip on the flashlight. "We need to search your vehicle. We have reason to believe you might be transporting illegal substances." That revelation slammed into Lena like a shock wave. She had done absolutely nothing illegal. Her sense of dread soared, but she had heard too many horror stories, particularly from other people of color, about escalating encounters with the police. She moved slowly, unfastening her seatbelt and stepping out. The humid Georgia air clung to her skin, and she felt the tension running electric under her scalp. Her mind swirled as the two officers guided her to the side of the cruiser. She glanced around, hoping a passing driver might witness what was happening, but the roads were near empty at this hour. Millstone wasn't known for heavy traffic after dusk. "Keep your hands where I can see them," the partner demanded. Lena complied, forcing her trembling hands up to shoulder level, the universal sign of surrender. Officer Barton peered at her license. "You're from out of state originally?" "California ID. Long way from home, aren't you?" Her family had moved from California years ago. Lena had grown up in Los Angeles before heading east for college and eventually settling in Georgia for her teaching job. She nodded. "I've been living here for a year. My license is still valid," she explained, trying to remain calm. "The state hasn't required me to change it yet." "Shut it," Barton snapped, cutting her off. His partner rummaged through her trunk, tossing aside grocery bags, educational pamphlets, and books on American history. Lena's eyes widened with dismay as the man carelessly crumpled her items and threw them on the asphalt. "I don't see nothing," the partner huffed after a moment, sounding disappointed. He scanned the rest of the vehicle, rifling through the glove compartment and center console. Still, nothing incriminating appeared. Barton exchanged a glance with his partner, and a silent tension filled the hot summer air. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she watched the officer's frustration rise. She knew the odds were stacked against her. 2 white officers, a single black woman, and no witnesses. Her heart drummed in her chest, but she forced herself to remain upright. The partner stepped closer. "What's in your purse?" he barked. Lena swallowed a lump of fear. "My wallet," she managed. "Lip gloss, a phone charger, some receipts. That's it." Without warning, Barton grabbed her purse off the hood of the car, rummaging through it. Her phone fell out and clattered onto the pavement. Lena let out a gasp as the screen flickered. "Sir, that's my personal property," she began, but her voice was drowned out by Barton's partner, who was rummaging more aggressively. Then, in a lightning move, the partner stepped back, holding a small plastic bag as though he had discovered a bomb. It was filled with white powder. Shock blasted across Lena's face, heat prickling her entire body. That was not hers. She had no idea where that had come from. "That's not mine," she cried, heart racing even faster. Barton's partner shook his head, mouth curling into a sneer. "Possession of illegal drugs, ma'am. That's an arrestable offense." For a moment, the world spun. Lena's eyes darted from the bag to the officer's smug expression. A sense of unreality settled over her. She was aware of stories about police planting evidence, but to witness it happening in real time, to her, unfathomable. Her mind screamed that none of this was right. She tried to speak, but her words barely formed in her throat. The next thing she felt were cold handcuffs locking around her wrists. "You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute," Barton said flatly, as if reading from a script. He spun Lena around, pressing her firmly onto the hood of the cruiser. The metal seared her skin, still warm from the day's sun. "That's not true. You're making a mistake," she cried, tears burning in her eyes. "I've never seen that bag in my life. I was volunteering at the MLK site in Atlanta all day. Ask them. Ask anyone." Her protests fell on deaf ears. The officers, faced with the absence of any real wrongdoing, had concocted their own narrative, and Lena was being hauled in. She thought about calling for help, but who would help her now? She saw her phone on the ground, the screen cracked but not completely broken. There was one lifeline, a name and a number she avoided flaunting for fear it would shadow her own achievements. But tonight, it might save her life. That number belonged to her sister, the newly sworn in U.S. Attorney General. Lena had promised herself she would never pull strings or ask for preferential treatment. But these cops weren't just harassing her, they were framing her. She was shoved into the back seat of the police cruiser, blood pounded in her ears. She was going to jail if she didn't do something. As the cruiser sped toward the Millstone Police Department station, Lena prayed that fate or justice would intervene. She needed to find a way to call her sister, but the officers hadn't given her that chance yet. As she stared through the barred window at the blur of passing headlights, a determination began to form in her chest. She was not going to be another statistic. She was going to fight this injustice, no matter the cost. She had no idea that this was only the beginning. and the storm that was about to break in Millstone would leave none of its citizens untouched. They dragged Lena out of the cruiser the moment they arrived at the Millstone Police Department, located off a side street near the local courthouse. The station was an unimposing single-story building of beige brick. However, to Lena, it felt ominous, like entering an unfriendly fortress. Officer Barton and his partner, whose nameplate read Vance, led her roughly through the entrance. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, highlighting worn tile floors scuffed by countless boots. The lobby was empty aside from a bored-looking receptionist behind bulletproof glass. A stack of pamphlets on community outreach programs sat ironically on a chipped table near the door. Without a word, the two officers escorted her past the reception desk, through a set of locked double doors, and down a corridor with cells flanking either side. The walls bore outdated posters about local events, including a police charity barbecue from 3 years ago. Another displayed a triumphant high school football team, championed for bringing glory to Millstone. Lena felt none of that spirit of community now, only the rigid sense of fear that accompanied her every step. Her mind tumbled with thoughts of how quickly a routine drive could turn into a nightmare. She hadn't even been speeding. Her entire day had been dedicated to volunteering and uplifting youth. The injustice seared her, but also ignited a spark of anger. If she didn't find a way to contact her sister, she could be railroaded into a drug charge that would ruin her entire life. She reminded herself, "You are not alone. You have resources." In a cramped, windowless room, essentially a glorified closet, they sat her on a chair facing a battered desk. Its surface was covered in scattered papers and coffee rings. A gray metal filing cabinet groaned in the corner. Officer Barton stood behind her, arms crossed, while Vance took a seat across the desk. The tension crackled like static. "All right," Vance said, flipping open a folder. Lena glimpsed her own photo pinned to some intake sheet. "Name? Age? Occupation? We have that. Says here you're a teacher? That right." He arched an eyebrow as though the notion of a black woman being a teacher was somehow suspicious. "I teach children at the community center in Millstone," Lena answered quietly, her throat tight. "I also volunteer in Atlanta. I'm not a criminal." Barton let out a derisive laugh. "Oh, you're not a criminal, but we found drugs in your purse?" "Sure, that's what they all say. So how do you want to play this, MS? Du Bois?" Lena's entire body tensed at the casual cruelty in his tone. She wanted to laugh, shout, to scream. Instead, she closed her eyes, inhaled slowly. She had to keep her composure. "Those weren't my drugs, and you know it," she said, meeting his gaze with trembling defiance. "I have the right to a phone call. I want to speak to an attorney." Vance's lip curled. "Phone call, huh? Well, we'll get to that. But first, you're going to answer some questions." He leaned forward, the overhead light highlighting a sharp glint in his eyes. "Where did you get the cocaine?" Lena gaped, words momentarily failing her. "I didn't," she managed after a moment. "I've never touched cocaine in my life. I'm telling you, it's not mine." Barton chimed in. "Look, maybe there's a chance you were carrying it for someone else. Did you buy it? Or maybe you got it off some street corner in Atlanta. Doesn't matter. We just need a name, and maybe you'll catch a break." He smirked as though offering a grand favor. Anger rose in Lena's chest. These men were clearly not interested in the truth. They wanted a confession or a scapegoat. She set her jaw. "I want my phone call," she repeated, each word measured. "That's my right." The two officers exchanged a look. Vance rolled his eyes. "Fine. We'll get you your call," he said sarcastically, standing up. "But don't expect to get off easy. Possession is possession." Barton grabbed Lena by the arm, and she felt his nails digging even through her shirt. He marched her down another hallway, flinging her into a holding cell that held 2 benches bolted to the walls. The door clanked shut behind her, the sound echoing like the final toll of doom. Lena stumbled, catching her balance, her heart pounding. She stared at the bleak concrete walls and dull metal bars. The overhead bulb flickered ominously. She had never been in jail or even visited a detention facility. The cold grip of despair momentarily threatened to consume her, but she thought of her sister, swore to herself that she would not break under fear. She sat gingerly on the bench, leaning against the cold cinder block wall. Time crawled. She had no idea how many minutes or hours passed. The hallway outside was mostly silent, save for the occasional hiss of a water pipe or a scuffling footstep. Eventually, a female officer in a wrinkled uniform came by, keys jangling. to walk Lena to the bathroom. The officer avoided eye contact, as though Lena's presence was an inconvenience. When Lena asked about her phone call, the woman snorted. "You'll get your turn. Might have to wait if we're short-staffed," she muttered. Then she hustled Lena back to the cell. Eventually, Vance reappeared. "Let's go," he said, opening the cell door. He led her to a small phone-like setup against a hallway wall. Her wrists were still cuffed in front of her, and he stood close enough that she knew any illusions of privacy were out the window. Lena slowly picked up the receiver, forcing her trembling fingers to dial from memory. She was grateful she had her sister's personal cell memorized. Her own phone was likely still on the floor of her car or locked in an evidence bag. Each beep of the phone keypad felt like a countdown to an even bigger gamble. Did she dare reveal her sister's identity? Her sister, Chloe Du Bois, had been confirmed as the U.S. Attorney General only 6 months prior. It was an historic appointment. Chloe was one of the first black women to hold that high office. Yet Lena never flaunted her sister's position. She was proud, of course, but she treasured her own sense of independence, and Chloe had insisted that family remain out of the public spotlight as much as possible. But now, with her life and freedom on the line, Lena saw no choice. She listened to the ring, once, twice, 3 times. Fear tugged at her heart. What if Chloe didn't pick up? The ring continued, then clicked. "Lena." Chloe's voice filled the line, warm but instantly concerned. "Is that you? Why are you calling from?" "I'm in trouble," Lena whispered, glancing at Vance, who was practically breathing down her neck. "I've been arrested by the Millstone PD. They planted drugs on me, Chloe. They're framing me." She heard her sister's sharp intake of breath. "Where are you exactly?" Chloe's tone was crisp, professional. "Are you safe?" "I'm at the station," Lena muttered. She forced herself not to cry. "I don't feel safe. I need help." "All right. Listen to me carefully," Chloe said. "Don't say anything more to them without an attorney present. I'll make calls. Don't worry. We'll figure this out. I promise." Her voice resonated with a quiet authority that Lena clung to like a lifeline. Lena nodded, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She inhaled slowly, determined to stay strong. "Thank you," she managed. I love you." The line cut off abruptly as Vance snatched the receiver from Lena's hand. "All done," he said flatly, ignoring her glare. Back to the cell. Lena's heart thundered with mingled relief and anxiety. She had managed to contact her sister, but the thought of how the local police might react once they discovered who Chloe Du Bois was filled her with both hope and dread. Vance and Barton didn't seem to suspect the significance of Lena's phone call. Their arrogance suggested they believed her to be another powerless figure they could coerce or silence. Lena let them maintain that delusion for the moment. The next hours or days might bring a storm crashing down on Millstone PD that they would never see coming. As Lena returned to the cold bench, she considered the chain of events that had led her here. She vowed that no matter what it took, she would not let these corrupt officers ruin her life. With her sister on the case, the gears of justice might soon turn in her favor. All she had to do now was endure. But the story was far from over. Little did she know that forces within the station, within the town, and far beyond Millstone were about to collide in a way that would forever change all their lives. Morning light eventually seeped in through a small window high on the corridor wall, illuminating the cells in a dull, watery glow. Lena hadn't slept much, jolted awake by every clank of footsteps and every murmur from other detainees. Her body ached from the hard bench and the emotional toll of the previous night's ordeal. The shift changed at dawn, and fresh officers ambled through the station, yawning. A tall, thin officer with prominent cheekbones named Officer Ramon Garza took over from a tired colleague. As he moved to sign some paperwork, Garza's gaze briefly landed on Lena in her cell. She noticed a flash of confusion, perhaps even concern, cross his face. He nodded politely, but said nothing. In a matter of moments, he disappeared into the back offices. An hour later, the station's main entrance slammed open. Harried footsteps and raised voices echoed down the hallway. Lena perked up, straining to hear. She couldn't catch specific words, but she sensed tension. Then a female voice rang out in authoritative tones, rattling the stillness of the station. Officer Barton's baritone responded, indignant. The argument continued for several minutes until eventually, the door at the end of Lena's corridor burst open. In walked a woman wearing a tailored navy blue pantsuit, her hair in a neat bun. She was flanked by a pair of serious-looking individuals in standard black suits, federal agents from the looks of it. Lena felt her heart jolt. It was her sister, Chloe Du Bois, the newly appointed U.S. Attorney General of the United States. Behind Chloe, a short older man with graying hair introduced himself, Special Agent David Ramirez, FBI. He carried a leather folder tucked under one arm. The third person was a woman with sharp eyes and an earpiece, presumably another agent assigned to Chloe's security detail. Barton and Vance hovered near them, red-faced, spluttering protests. Barton's posture was rigid, though Lena noticed uncertainty warring with anger in his eyes. Vance looked pale as a sheet, but tried to maintain an air of confidence. Officer Garza trailed behind, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. He stood at a distance, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Chloe Du Bois scanned the corridor until her gaze landed on Lena, still behind bars. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, Lena felt a surge of relief, yet also sorrow that it had come to this. Chloe's expression hardened, lines of anger etching her features. "Release her immediately," Chloe commanded, turning to the group of officers. Her voice was calm, but carried the authority of the nation's top law enforcement official. Barton recovered quickly, crossing his arms. "Ma'am, I don't know who you think you are, but that woman is under arrest for possession of cocaine. We're not letting her walk just because you waltz in here with an entourage." Vance chimed in, voice shaking with a mix of fear and indignation. "She's a suspect in an ongoing investigation. We have evidence." Chloe gave a slow, practiced nod. "I am Chloe Du Bois, the U.S. Attorney General," she said. "And you have my sister, Ms. Lena Du Bois, falsely detained." She flicked her eyes to the cell. "I have reason to believe your so-called evidence was fabricated. Now, I'm giving you one chance to correct your mistake before we elevate this matter to a federal civil rights investigation." Her words landed like thunder, and Lena saw the color drain further from Vance's face. Barton's jaw muscle twitched. He tried to muster a retort, but after glancing at the stoic FBI agent, he seemed to lose some of his bravado. "This is a local matter," Barton spat finally, though he no longer sounded certain. "The suspect was found in possession of illegal substances. We're following procedure. So, if you have a complaint, you can take it up with our chief." "I'll be doing exactly that," Chloe said icily. She turned to the female agent. "Lydia, please escort Ms. Du Bois out of the cell. Let's see if these fine officers intend to physically obstruct a federal law enforcement action." The agent named Lydia stepped forward, producing identification. She looked at Barton and Vance, daring them to intervene as she unlatched the cell door. Lena stepped out, trying her best to keep her trembling in check. She was free from the bars, but the confrontation was far from over. Barton's partner, Vance, swore under his breath. He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Chief, we got a situation," he muttered, his voice cracking. Chloe and the federal agents ignored him, guiding Lena away from the cell block. Officer Garza approached quietly, shooting Lena a sympathetic look. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. She gave a small nod, not trusting her voice. A flicker of compassion in his eyes let her know he suspected something was off about this whole situation. They all moved to a small meeting room near the main lobby. Chloe insisted that Lena be seated comfortably, then turned to face Barton, Vance, and the newly arrived Chief Bronson, a stout man with thinning hair and a face pinched into a permanent scowl. Chief Bronson demanded to know what the fuss was about. Chloe's calm recitation of Lena's story brought a flush to his cheeks, but he quickly tried to paint Lena as uncooperative and suspicious. "Is that so?" Chloe said, crossing her arms. "Then show me the footage from the dash cam and body cam of the arrest. By law, your officers are required to activate them during traffic stops." Bronson blinked, shifting uncomfortably. Barton and Vance exchanged a quick, panicked look. "We're still processing last night's footage," Barton said, stammering slightly. "There's a chance the camera malfunctioned." Chloe's lips pressed into a line. "Interesting," she said softly, as though discussing the weather. "Because the federal funding your department receives for body cameras mandates thorough record keeping. I'll be requesting that footage immediately." An intense silence followed. The FBI agent, David Ramirez, stepped forward. "We'll be conducting a thorough investigation of this matter," he said, carefully enunciating each word. "If we find evidence that your officers have tampered with recordings or planted evidence, This will become a federal case under the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. I trust you understand the gravity, Chief Bronson? The chief swallowed hard. Now hold on. Let's not jump to conclusions, he said, trying to maintain composure. We've got a process here. If Ms. Du Bois believes she was wronged, she's welcome to file a complaint. Chloe's gaze was icy. Oh, you'll see her complaint. All right, along with a full federal inquiry into your department's practices. Lena felt a whirlwind of relief mingled with a fierce sense of vindication. Still, her hands shook slightly as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. This small-town department had no idea what they had stepped into. The most senior law enforcement official in the country was standing up for her, and not simply because they were sisters, but because justice demanded it. Chief Bronson attempted a diplomatic approach. Let's calm down. Ms. Du Bois is free to go, pending further investigation. We'll hold the alleged drug evidence until we can verify. Do you honestly think that evidence will hold up to federal scrutiny? Chloe asked, arching an eyebrow. That little plastic bag might as well have your officer's fingerprints all over it, literal or otherwise, Chief. Officer Garza interjected quietly. I think we should do as they say. If we have nothing to hide, cooperating is the best path. The moment he spoke, Barton shot him a warning glare, but Garza ignored it. Lena realized that Garza might be one of the few decent officers in this building. Bronson pinched the bridge of his nose as though warding off a headache. All right, he muttered. Officer Barton, Officer Vance, please gather all relevant evidence, including your body cam footage. Agent Ramirez, Madam Attorney General, you'll have our full cooperation. Chloe nodded curtly. Excellent. Lena, let's get out of here. The group exited the meeting room and made their way toward the station doors. Vance and Barton scurried behind, muttering to each other in low, furious tones. Lena had little doubt they were cooking up some excuse or plan to cover themselves. Just as Lena stepped into the lobby, she spotted a woman she recognized, Jennifer Sullivan, a local journalist from the Millstone Gazette. The short, bespectacled reporter rushed over, brandishing a small notepad and a phone camera. Ms. Du Bois, care to comment? Her eyes darted between Lena and the U.S. Attorney General. Before Jennifer could finish, the cluster of federal agents hurried Lena and Chloe out the door, ignoring questions. Jennifer quickly snapped a few photographs. Lena felt a nod of anxiety. Media attention might complicate everything. She glanced at Chloe, who gave a reassuring nod, as if to say, we'll handle it. Outside, the morning sun and fresh air felt almost alien after the stale oppression of the holding cell. Lena inhaled deeply, trying to steady her pounding heart. The FBI agent, David Ramirez, escorted them to a sleek black SUV parked at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the quiet street. Let's get you somewhere safe, Ramirez said in a low voice. We'll convene with the team and figure out next steps. Lena nodded, still trying to absorb the sudden shift in her situation. Yesterday, she was a volunteer guide at a historic site and a humble teacher at the local community center. Today, she was the focus of a potential civil rights lawsuit, with her own sister leading the charge from the highest halls of power. As the SUV pulled away, Lena allowed herself a moment of hope. She wasn't alone. The truth would come to light. Yet she also sensed that this was only the beginning of the storm. The scandal would put a target on her back and on Chloe's. Corruption had a way of protecting itself, and those two officers, along with whoever shielded them, wouldn't back down easily. Little did Lena know this case would erupt into something far larger, shaking Millstone to its core and putting her and everyone she cared about on a collision course with forces determined to keep their old ways intact. By late afternoon, the small town of Millstone buzzed with tension. Word had spread that a high-profile arrest had gone sideways at the local police department and that the newly appointed U.S. Attorney General had arrived in person to secure the suspect's release. Gossip churned at the local diner, on front porches, and across social media pages. Some residents expressed shock and anger that their beloved police force might be embroiled in corruption. Others clung to the idea that outsiders were stirring up trouble in the community. Lena found herself seated at a polished wooden table in a conference room at the local FBI field office in downtown Atlanta. It was a nondescript office tower near the courthouse, but inside, everything hummed with efficiency and order. Chloe had insisted that Lena undergo a thorough health checkup after her release from the holding cell. Fortunately, aside from exhaustion and bruised wrists, she was physically okay. Emotionally, however, she was frayed. Across the table from Lena sat Special Agent David Ramirez and a junior colleague who was already sifting through paperwork, digital records, and police logs. Chloe paced the length of the room, pausing now and then to speak into her phone or examine documents on the table. Lena, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, felt surreal. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from a quiet life to being the focal point of a federal inquiry. Ramirez cleared his throat. Ms. Dubois, we've requested all dash cam and body cam footage from last night. The Millstone PD claims the body cam malfunctioned, but they did provide dash cam recordings. We've got a preliminary copy. He nodded to his colleague, who pressed a few keys on a laptop. A grainy video began to play on a large screen. The footage showed Lena's car pulling over to the side of the road. Officer Barton's cruiser parked behind it. Lena could be seen exiting her vehicle at the officer's command. Due to the angle, the camera view was partially obstructed, but the audio picked up faint voices. Her polite, "Is there a problem?" was audible. Then a few crackles and stutters as the microphone cut in and out. The viewer could make out Barton's curt demands to search her trunk and Vance's rummaging, but the audio was full of interference. Then came the crucial moment. The camera jostled, and the audio cut out entirely for a few seconds. By the time it resumed, Vance was holding the small plastic bag. It appeared in the footage, but the moment of discovery was missing, presumably from a technical glitch. Lena clenched her jaw. It was so convenient that the footage went missing at the precise moment the drugs appeared. Chloe's expression hardened as she watched. "Just as we suspected," she muttered. "The footage that would exonerate Lena is conveniently gone. We need more than this. We need witness accounts or the original, unedited files that might exist on their servers. We also need to see if there was any external camera. Sometimes highways have traffic cameras." Agent Ramirez nodded. "We're on it, Madam Attorney General." Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Another agent poked his head in, holding a phone. "There's a call for Ms. Lena Dubois," he said. "It's from someone named Jennifer Sullivan, a reporter at the Millstone Gazette. She's been calling repeatedly, says she has new information about the incident." Lena exchanged glances with Chloe, who shrugged. "Couldn't hurt to see what she has," Chloe said. "But be cautious." Lena picked up the extension. "Hello, Jennifer," she said, voice steadying despite her nerves. "Oh, Ms. Dubois, thank you for taking my call," Jennifer said in a rush. "I spoke to someone who was near the scene when you were pulled over. They might have phone footage of the arrest. She's scared to come forward, but if there's a safe way to do it, she will." Lena sat straighter, heart thumping. "Someone recorded it," she echoed. "That might be exactly what we need to prove I was framed." "Yes, but she wants anonymity for now," Jennifer continued quickly. "She says she saw the second officer slip something into your purse. She was driving by and started filming because she sensed something was off. The video isn't perfect, but it shows enough to raise serious questions." Lena covered the phone's mouthpiece with her hand and looked at Chloe. "A bystander has cell phone footage," she whispered, eyes bright with hope. Chloe's eyes widened. Then she broke into a rare, relieved smile. "We can arrange protection for that witness," Chloe said firmly. "Ms. Sullivan, can you provide the FBI with her contact details? She'll be safe if she cooperates with our investigation." Jennifer hesitated a second. "I need to confirm with her, but I believe she'd be amenable to that. I'll keep you posted." Her voice was earnest. They ended the call, and Lena relayed the details to the group in the conference room. Agent Ramirez immediately began coordinating with local offices to set up a meeting with the witness. Chloe placed a call to a colleague in the Civil Rights Division, briefing them on the new development. In those intense moments, a small wave of relief washed over Lena. Evidence existed, tangible proof that she hadn't simply made this up. She felt the gravity of it in her chest, a sense that she might yet clear her name and hold Barton and Vance accountable. Still, Lena couldn't ignore the tingle of fear under her excitement. People who threatened to expose police misconduct often faced retaliation. She worried about the unknown witness's safety and her own. The upcoming hours would be critical. In Millstone, meanwhile, Chief Bronson was trying to do damage control. The local media circled like sharks, demanding statements. Rumors circulated that federal agents had discovered rampant corruption in the department. Local politicians started distancing themselves from the chief. carefully choosing neutral statements like, "We are committed to justice for all." Meanwhile, the townspeople took sides, some praising the feds for cracking down on alleged abuse, others demonizing the big city outsiders for stepping on local authority. Officer Barton and Officer Vance, for their part, were holed up inside the station, meeting with their union representative and frantically conferring with the chief. Furious whispers passed between them. "If that witness steps forward, we're done," Vance muttered. Barton's eyes glinted with anger. "We'll handle it. We just need to find out who it is," he growled. Unbeknownst to them, Officer Garza stood outside the closed door, overhearing enough to realize that the two cops weren't simply incompetent. They were actively planning to cover up wrongdoing. A knot of dread twisted in Garza's stomach. He had joined the force to serve and protect, not to watch fellow officers trample on the law for personal prejudices. Garza quietly retreated down the hall, his mind racing. He had noticed irregularities for months. Missing footage, questionable reports, routine harassment of minorities by certain officers. But he had never had the courage or evidence to speak up. Now, though, the highest law enforcement official in the country was involved, and Garza sensed an opening. Perhaps he could provide them with internal records or speak as a whistleblower. But fear clawed him too. Crossing the blue wall of silence carried heavy risks. That evening, as the sun dipped low over Atlanta, Lena and Chloe sat together in a corner of the FBI lounge, sipping lukewarm coffee. Chloe's protective arm rested on Lena's shoulder. They had been at the office all day, giving statements, reviewing partial evidence. Lena glanced at her sister, gratitude and concern warring on her face. "Chloe," Lena began softly, "I'm so sorry to drag you into." "Stop," Chloe said firmly. "You didn't drag me anywhere. This is my job. And more importantly, you're my sister. I'd do anything for you." Lena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She managed a watery smile. "I know. It's just, I never wanted to overshadow you with family drama. You have so many responsibilities." Chloe returned the smile gently. "My responsibilities include upholding justice." "That's exactly what this is about." They fell into a brief silence, each lost in thought. After a moment, Chloe spoke again. "This might get messy, Lena. If there's deep corruption in Millstone PD, they won't hesitate to smear you, or me, or that witness to save themselves. We have to be prepared for anything." Lena nodded slowly. She thought of the children at the community center and how she had always tried to teach them that truth and fairness would prevail if they stood strong. She wanted to believe that message now. "I'll stand firm," she said, more for her own reassurance. "We'll expose them." Night settled over the city, but the wheels of justice and injustice continued to spin. Officer Garza quietly gathered documents while Barton and Vance schemed in the shadows, and the unknown witness debated whether to speak or remain hidden. By midnight, a hush fell over Millstone streets, yet no one truly slept. Everyone sensed a looming confrontation, a tide that could no longer be held back. In the center of it all stood Lena Du Bois and her sister, the U.S. Attorney General, two women determined to topple a facade of racism and corruption, no matter the cost. Little did they know a final showdown was just around the corner, one that would test their resolve and drive the entire town of Millstone to reckon with its darkest shadows. The following day dawned overcast and humid, as though the weather itself anticipated a brewing storm. Lena spent the night in a secure hotel room arranged by the FBI, while Chloe continued coordinating from the field office. The tension in the air was palpable. Early that morning, Jennifer Sullivan called again. "The witness is ready to come forward," she said, excitement lacing her voice. "She wants to meet at a neutral location with you and the FBI. We've arranged a safe meeting at an undisclosed site within the hour." Lena, Chloe, and Agent Ramirez were on the road, heading to a small law firm in downtown Atlanta. It was a quiet, neutral space where the witness felt secure enough to speak. On the drive, Lena stared out the window at the sprawling cityscape, feeling a mix of hope and dread. The witness's footage could be the smoking gun, but once it came to light, the backlash might be fierce. At the law firm, they were ushered into a modest conference room with plain gray walls and a few motivational posters about justice and ethics. Jennifer Sullivan was already there, her hands clasped in her lap, looking both nervous and determined. Beside her sat a young woman in her early 20s, wearing a hoodie pulled low over her forehead as though trying to hide. She had doe-like eyes that flicked nervously between Chloe and Lena. "Simone, this is Lena Dubois," Jennifer said gently. "She's the one who was arrested. And this is Chloe Dubois, her sister, the U.S. Attorney General." Simone looked stunned, her dark eyes widening. She cleared her throat. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she said, voice trembling. I've seen enough. I don't trust the police in Millstone." She paused, glancing down at her hands. "I was driving home from a friend's place and saw the traffic stop. Something felt off, so I started filming on my phone. At first, I was just capturing the tail end of your conversation, but then I saw the officer slip something into your purse." Lena's heart pounded. Here was living proof of what she had experienced, someone else who had witnessed the plant. "Thank you for coming forward," she said, voice thick with emotion. Chloe gave the young woman a kind but firm look. "Simone, we understand this is scary, but your testimony and that video could expose corruption. You're doing the right thing." She glanced at Ramirez, who nodded. "We can offer you protection if you feel threatened." With shaking hands, Simone pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, but she navigated to a video file. Agent Ramirez produced a laptop and cable to transfer the file for safekeeping. Once connected, the video played on the laptop screen. The footage was shaky, filmed through a partially rolled-down car window at night, but the audio was surprisingly clear. It captured Lena already outside her vehicle, hands raised. Officer Barton was at her side, shining a flashlight. Officer Vance was crouched near the trunk, rummaging through items. Then, in a telling moment, Vance's hand reached into his own vest pocket before he moved toward Lena's open purse. The object he withdrew was small, a plastic bag, which he smoothly slipped into the purse. Officer Barton and Officer Vance realized the jig was up. Their attempts to destroy evidence were thwarted by a quick-moving FBI tech team. Encrypted copies of body cam logs, dash cam data, and internal communications were collected. In the chaos, Officer Garza quietly assisted the agents, pointing them to relevant files and records. In the process, the FBI discovered a pattern: numerous malfunctioning body cams during stops involving people of color and repeated references to suspicious behavior with scant or falsified documentation. The day of the grand jury hearing dawned under a high summer sun. Heat shimmered off the pavement outside the courthouse in downtown Atlanta, where a crowd of onlookers, reporters, and protesters had gathered. It was an unusual level of attention for a case from such a small suburb, but the involvement of the U.S. Attorney General had catapulted it into the national spotlight. Television vans lined the streets, and the courthouse steps thronged with signs demanding justice, accountability, and reform. Inside, the air conditioning worked overtime to offset the crush of bodies. Lena arrived, accompanied by Chloe and a detail of federal agents. She felt a surge of nerves as she entered the courthouse, her mind replaying the moment of her arrest over and over. She could still feel the zip of handcuffs around her wrists, still see the triumphant sneer on Officer Vance's face. But today, the tables were turning. They were led to a large hearing room where lawyers, journalists, and community members watched from the public gallery. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. At the front, the prosecution team was flanked by FBI agents, while on the defense side, a cluster of uniformed officers sat somberly, including Barton, Vance, and Chief Bronson. The chief, in particular, looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, his features drawn and gaunt. Before the proceeding began, Agent Ramirez updated Lena and Chloe in hushed tones. "We've identified at least 7 officers involved in falsifying records or planting evidence. Most of them have turned on each other to secure deals. Barton and Vance are still maintaining innocence, but they're cornered. Bronson's lawyer is trying to negotiate lesser charges, but the evidence is too strong." Chloe nodded, her expression grim. Lena felt a strange sense of both relief and sadness. A wave of memories washed over her. Her first day teaching in Millstone, her optimism about bridging divides, the children she'd tutored. She never wanted to see the town's name tarnished like this, but truth had to prevail. The hearing opened with formalities, the reading of charges, the introduction of counsel, the calling of witnesses. Lena was called to the stand early. Her heart fluttered, but Chloe's encouraging nod bolstered her. In a clear voice, Lena recounted the events of that night, how the officers had pulled her over for a supposed headlight violation, searched her car without consent, and then planted the bag of cocaine in her purse. She described the fear and confusion, her repeated assertions of innocence, and the physical roughness with which she was handled. When the defense attorney attempted to discredit her, painting Lena as nervous and uncooperative, she held her ground, calmly clarifying each detail of the ordeal. The turning point came when the prosecution played Simone's cell phone footage on the courtroom's large display monitors. Vance's attempt to slip the drugs into Lena's purse was shown in full. Gasps rippled through the audience. Vance's lawyer slumped visibly in his chair. Then came testimonies from other victims of similar stops, followed by Officer Garza, who explained the internal pressure to look the other way. He described repeated incidents of unexplained evidence, the existence of a code of silence enforced by senior officers, and his own mounting guilt. He seemed resolute, though clearly troubled by how deeply the corruption ran. Finally, Barton and Vance were given a chance to speak. Their eyes flickered with anger, but cornered by hard evidence, they could no longer weave their lies. Vance stammered through a half-hearted excuse, claiming he made a mistake under pressure. Barton tried to maintain an air of self-righteousness, but ended up lashing out, accusing Lena of cooperating with criminals and painting himself as a victim of a media witch hunt. It was a desperate, pitiful display that only worsened his image. Chief Bronson, facing a litany of charges including obstruction, conspiracy, and gross negligence, tried to salvage what remained of his reputation. He apologized to the community, claiming he'd been misled by rogue officers like Barton and Vance. But the prosecution presented emails and logs showing he had ignored repeated complaints and even authorized enhanced patrols in minority neighborhoods, effectively greenlighting harassment. The chief's face reddened as the evidence stacked against him. His repeated refrain, "I didn't know it was this bad," fell flat. When the grand jury returned indictments against Barton, Vance, Bronson, and several complicit officers, the crowd erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Those indicted were led away in cuffs, the same steel bracelets they had so often slapped on others without cause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment when Vance shot a venomous glare at Lena, as if blaming her for his downfall. But she held her head high, refusing to be intimidated. Outside the courthouse, cheers and applause broke out from a gathered group of activists and community members. Some carried signs reading, "Justice for Lena," and "No more dirty cops." Others chanted for broader police reform, mindful that this case was just one example of a national problem. Lena, exhausted but relieved, stepped to the podium with Chloe by her side. Microphones sprouted from every direction. Chloe spoke first. "Today, justice has prevailed in this courtroom. But let us not forget the larger task at hand. This isn't just about one corrupt department. It's about ensuring that law enforcement across our nation upholds the highest standards of integrity and fairness. We must continue to fight for reforms that prevent abuses of power, protect citizens, and honor the trust placed in our institutions." Lena then took a shaky breath and addressed the crowd. "I want to thank every person who stood up for me, who believed me when I said I was innocent. And I want to thank Simone for her bravery in filming the truth. This experience taught me how fragile justice can be, but also how strong it becomes when good people unite. Let's make sure no one else goes through something like this." The throng of reporters shouted questions, but Chloe and Lena allowed themselves only a few responses before stepping away. As they retreated to a waiting SUV, a sense of finality washed over Lena. But it wasn't a simple ending. It was the start of a long road to healing and rebuilding for the town, for the victims, and for Lena herself. In the weeks that followed, the hammer of justice came down hard. Barton and Vance were tried, convicted, and sentenced for numerous charges, including conspiracy, falsification of evidence, and violation of civil rights. Chief Bronson also faced a stiff sentence and was replaced by an interim chief committed to cleaning up the department. A thorough audit of the Millstone PD led to a wave of resignations, retirements, and new hires, with strong guidelines to prevent future misconduct. Millstone's mayor publicly apologized for the failure of oversight and pledged to establish a citizen review board. Community meetings were held where residents voiced concerns and proposed changes, from body cam transparency to anti-bias training. It was painful work, but there was a collective sense that the town could emerge stronger if it genuinely confronted its flaws. Lena returned to her teaching and community volunteering with renewed passion. The children at the center welcomed her with hugs, and parents praised her courage. A mural was painted on the community center's outer wall, depicting civil rights icons alongside the words, justice, accountability, hope. Lena found solace in that artwork, reflecting on her own journey. Chloe, after ensuring the case was on a firm path, returned to Washington, D.C., her plate already full with other pressing national issues. But she kept in close touch with Lena, who finally relaxed back into her life, no longer living under the specter of false accusations. She knew she was forever changed by the ordeal, wiser about the depths of prejudice, but also more inspired by the power of truth and unity. In the end, the hard karma that struck the corrupt officers left them facing the very system they once abused. They were forced to answer for every fabricated charge, every malicious act. And while that didn't erase the harm done, it was a powerful statement. No one is above the law. The road to true equality was long, but Lena's case lit a spark in Millstone. Sometimes justice arrives in bursts, ignited by the courage of those who refuse to be silenced and those who stand beside them, unwavering until the truth blazes into the open. Months passed, and life in Millstone found a cautious equilibrium. The new police chief held open forums, trying to mend the fractured relationship between law enforcement and residents. The whistleblower, Officer Garza, was honored by several civil rights organizations for his role in exposing the department's wrongdoing. Simone, the young woman who filmed Lena's arrest, continued to receive support to ensure her safety. Though her identity was eventually revealed, she became something of a local hero, proving that ordinary citizens could change the course of justice by daring to document the truth. Lena resumed her normal routines, though her life was forever altered by the ordeal. She gave interviews and public talks, focusing on the importance of civic engagement and accountability. At the community center, she used her experience to teach students about their constitutional rights, the history of civil rights movements, and how activism could protect communities from abuses of power. Parents often thanked her for turning a personal trauma into a lesson for the greater good. Lena Du Bois's journey proves that courage, truth, and solidarity can stand against even the most oppressive forces. From a late-night traffic stop that could have ruined her life to a landmark court case that reshaped an entire police department, Lena's story resonates with anyone who's ever felt the sting of injustice. It reminds us that even in moments of despair, one act of courage, a sister's intervention, a bystander's phone recording, a whistleblower's testimony, can spark systemic change.